Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We're continuing our Pac-12 football predictions today, and our next team had a disappointing year last year, have to replace their star quarterback but bring in one of the best coaches in all of college football. They are the UCLA Bruins. It was a disappointing year for UCLA last year, especially after starting the season 2-0, including that miraculous comeback against Texas A&M in the opener. But after that, they did not win consecutive games for the rest of the season. They still made a bowl game, though, going 6-6 on the regular season, but lost their bowl game to Kansas State and saw Jim Mora get fired in the regular season. But now, there's a lot of excitement at UCLA this year, especially after bringing in Chip Kelly, who did a great job at Oregon during his college football career, getting them to be one of the biggest Pac-12 powers that we had seen in recent memory, leaving Oregon to go take a job in the NFL with the Eagles, had a stint with the 49ers, and now he's back in the college ranks coaching the Bruins and back in the Pac-12. So this is a UCLA team, though, that had a lot of inexperience here. It's going to take a great job from Chip Kelly this season to get them back to a bowl game. They returned 5 starters on offense, but the big player that they lose is, of course, their star quarterback in Josh Rosen, first-round draft pick in last year's NFL draft. On offense, though, who's going to replace Josh Rosen? Who is going to be the quarterback? Will it be Dorian Thompson-Robinson, or will it be the Michigan transfer Wilton Speight? It's really up in the air right now. Robinson being a freshman, Speight having plenty of experience in the college ranks, playing in some big games during his time at Michigan. They return a solid wide receiver in Theo Howard, as well as a solid tight end in Caleb Wilson, but only return 2 offensive linemen. So the offense, obviously Chip Kelly's specialty, as we have seen at Oregon and sometimes in the NFL, still going to have a lot of pieces to put together to have a very solid offense this year in the Pac-12. The defense, though, probably going to be the strength of the Bruins this year. You have Nate Metters, Darnay Holmes, and Adarius Pickett leading the secondary, and probably going to be the leader of this entire UCLA defense. You've got Chris Barnes and Josh Woods being very strong in the linebacking core. And this defense for UCLA is mostly upperclassmen. The majority of this team are juniors and seniors, so they do have some experience there on the defensive side of the ball. But as a team combined, it is a very inexperienced UCLA team. And if you look at the schedule before we dive into the predictions, you just have to look at how difficult the schedule is for Chip Kelly and the Bruins. Probably the most difficult schedule in the entire country. You got Cincinnati, not an easy team there. At Oklahoma, a Fresno State team that went 1-11 2 years ago, but bounced back with a 10-win season last year. Obviously, Washington, Oregon, and USC and Stanford. And then out of the North, you draw Washington, Stanford, Oregon, and California, arguably the top 4 teams in the North. So a very, very difficult schedule for UCLA. They open up the year against Cincinnati. And I think that's going to be a win. I think it's going to be a Cincinnati team that is going to struggle to make a bowl game. Luke Fickell, I love him as a head coach over there, but I don't think they're going to have enough to come into UCLA and get the win here. And a good kind of warm-up game for Chip Kelly in the new era, trying to figure out where his offense is at and try to get some player chemistry going in a game they should take care of. But then, week 2, another interesting game, one that's probably flying a little bit under the radar, at Oklahoma. An Oklahoma team that has to replace their star quarterback as well in Baker Mayfield, but I think they have a more solid of a replacement than UCLA does. More than likely going to be starting Kyler Murray, a dual-threat quarterback who has plenty of playing time at Texas A&M and a little bit at Oklahoma as well. As we all know, Oklahoma Memorial Stadium, a very difficult place to play. This is an Oklahoma team led by Lincoln Riley, another brilliant offensive mind, but Oklahoma overall just has too much talent and too much depth on both sides of the ball, and I just don't see UCLA going in there and pulling off what would be a big-time upset over the Sooners. But it should be a fun one to watch. 2 great coaching minds going at it. And if UCLA's offense it surprises us and does better and looks better than we expect, you could be in for a big-time shootout in week 2. And then Fresno State back at UCLA, a game that the Bruins cannot overlook. Fresno State going to have a very dangerous offense as well. I believe they return about 15 starters this year, 8 on offense and 7 on defense. And like I said, a team that won 10 games last year, including their bowl game over Houston. So not a game that UCLA can overlook, especially if their offense isn't gelling this early on in the season. I think they will get the win over Fresno State, but they could be in for a little bit of a scare in this one. Then a bye week going into Colorado. Colorado also coming off a bye week. Last year, though, they beat the Buffaloes 27-23. That game, of course, being played at UCLA. This is a Colorado team, though, that Mike McIntyre has done a great job building up. A lot of faith in him this year. I think he can get the Buffaloes back to a bowl game. I think they own the edge at the quarterback position with Steven Montez. I think they own the edge, despite having one less starter returning on the defensive side of the ball, own the edge on defense. and they're also having a week of rest, and they're at home. I think Colorado gets a big-time win over UCLA, and the fact that they almost came on the road and beat UCLA last year shows them that they have the talent to beat them this year, especially with it being at home and more experienced. And then Washington, I can mark that down as a loss for UCLA here, even though it is at home. This is a Washington team that's just going to be too dangerous for just about anybody in the nation to face off against. And, you know, Jake Browning, one of the better quarterbacks, not just in the Pac-12, but the nation. Myles Gaskin, another great solid running back. And a defense that isn't getting a lot of attention, but will be extremely dominant in the Pac-12. Chris Peterson, one heck of a head coach, as we've seen over his entire coaching career. So this will be a fun one to watch. Peterson going up against Kelly. But in the end, Washington is definitely, I believe, going to get the win here. Then on the road against California. You know, another team last year that UCLA beat 30-27. That was the game that got UCLA to bowl eligibility. They had to win that game to get to a bowl game. Jim Mora had been fired by that point. They won 30-27 to get there. This year it's at California. And last year California surprised me, and I'm sure plenty of other people, winning 5 games last year. I didn't expect a whole lot of that, being a very inexperienced team. This year, California returns 18 starters. Once again, owns a quarterback edge with Ross Bowers there, and certainly, I believe, owns the edge on the defensive side of the ball with 8 returning starters. And that defensive line, very, very scary for any team that going up against the Golden Bears. It's on the road for UCLA. Yes, they won last year, but I think California gets their revenge this year with a much experienced team and a very hungry team at that. So a loss for UCLA here. And I know it's crazy to think that they're going to start off the year 2-4. I know it's kind of ridiculous, but it is extremely possible. This is, like I said, probably the toughest schedule in the entire nation. Then they go back at home to face off against Arizona. And I do think that they're going to win one of these games, whether it's against Arizona or Utah. That game against the Utes being played on a Friday night. Chip Kelly's going to get a signature win this year. A win against a team that he probably shouldn't beat. They're not going to go winless in the Pac-12. I don't think that's going to happen at all. I think that one win here so far is going to come against Arizona. I think they shut down Khalil Tate. I think they're going to be hyped for this game. Arizona, a team that I think could compete for the Pac-12 championship. It's at UCLA. It's going to be Pac-12 after dark, and I think they can get a big-time win over the Wildcats as long as they can shut down Khalil Tate, and I think they will be able to do that. So I think they're going to get a huge win over the Wildcats this year. I think they lose to the Utes at home, a Utah team that I have a lot of faith in. Kyle Whittingham, one heck of a head coach. I love their quarterback in Tyler Huntley, who can do some damage through the air, but doesn't get a lot of credit as a dual threat quarterback. Very solid there as well. And then Zach Moss, I believe he rushed for over 1,000 yards last year at the running back position. So this is a Utah team that is going to be very dangerous. Really, the top 3 in this South Division are going to be USC, Utah, and I believe Arizona. So maybe UCLA is more likely to beat Utah than they are Arizona. I think they will split that series there, but I'm going to give them the edge over the Wildcats more so than the Utes. Then at Oregon, obviously this is going to be a game that's circled on pretty much everybody's calendar. Chip Kelly makes his return to Oregon. That's going to be very, very exciting, very, very intriguing. And I think the Ducks put a beating on the Bruins. I think Oregon fans, this Oregon team, while the majority of these players, or if any of these players did not play under Kelly during his time at Oregon, they're going to know that it's a pretty big deal that a former head coach of Oregon is going to make his return with another Pac-12 school. That's a pretty big deal. It's going to be a very emotional game, but I think Justin Herbert has a pretty big day against this UCLA defense, even though they do have a very strong secondary. This is going to be a very crazy environment, a fun environment, but I just don't see UCLA going in there and defeating Mario Cristobal and this Ducks team that I think will be very, very dangerous. And yes, everybody talks about their offense and Justin Herbert, but their defense under Jim Levis as defensive coordinator, not one to be overlooked. I think they go on the road and take a loss to Oregon, but that will certainly be a fun one and very interesting to see Kelly's return there. On the road against Arizona State, last year defeating the Sun Devils 44-37. I keep referencing last year. I know it was last year. Yes, they had Rosen. Yes, he had injuries. I know it's a completely different team for all of these teams, for UCLA and every opponent they face. But you know, you have to think about that a little bit. They beat Arizona State last year at home 44-37. This year they're going on the road facing a new head coach as well, and Herm Edwards. That's going to be an intriguing matchup there. Kelly versus Herm Edwards. But this is an Arizona State team. I love their offense way more than I love UCLA's offense. Maybe by this point, Chip Kelly has surprised us, and the Bruins have a very potent offense, one that we didn't expect. But I would take my chances with Manny Wilkins and N'Keal Harry and Kyle Williams and some of those strong wide receivers for Arizona State. It's on the road, out in the desert. I just don't see UCLA going on the road and getting the win here. I think Arizona State's going to have enough offense to generate against this UCLA defense, and I think they get a win there. Last year's game against USC, obviously a rival game there. was a close one. It was a close game against the Trojans, and that was with a better Trojans team. This year, UCLA gets to host USC, and they are without Sam Darnold. But this is still a Clay Helton-led team that's going to be a threat in the Pac-12 South. By this point, we'll obviously have had a replacement quarterback that should be a little more consistent, a little more comfortable in the pocket, and still has plenty of talent and plenty of speed. UCLA, I do not think will get a win over the Trojans this year. Obviously, this is going to be one that Chip Kelly would love to getting it over their in-state rival. I just don't see it happening right now. And then on the road, at home against Stanford, another interesting game here to close out the year. Obviously, a disastrous year for Chip Kelly in year one. Stanford, a team that if UCLA is going to have to bottle up Bryce Love. That's going to be the key for any team facing Stanford this year, is to stop Bryce Love, who's obviously the Heisman frontrunner. But once again, even if you do, it's not like Stanford doesn't have a great quarterback. They've got a very solid quarterback in KJ Costello, who can beat you in the air as well. And then a defense that returned 6 starters, one to not be overlooked. Stanford's going to have too much here, especially if Stanford is in contention for the Pac-12 title game. They certainly will not want to overlook UCLA. They're going to be hungry, want to get this win, and I think they will. So a loss there as well. So yes, I know that gives UCLA a 3-9 record in Chip Kelly's first year. Probably his worst record in the college ranks that he's ever had, obviously, because of what he did at Oregon. But we can't dwell on the past. We can't look back and say, well, because he did this at Oregon, he's going to do that at UCLA. I think he will get that there eventually. But his first year at Oregon, I believe he went 10-3. That's not going to be the case for UCLA. He does inherit some solid talent. Maybe if they had kept Josh Rosen, I'd be a little more high on the Bruins this year. But this is an extremely, extremely difficult schedule in a year where the Pac-12 is very, very strong, especially with those North teams they have to face in Washington, California, Stanford, and Oregon. The South isn't going to be easy with USC and Utah and Arizona. This is a very difficult schedule, including a road game at Oklahoma in non-conference play. So it's going to take, I think, a small miracle for Chip Kelly to get this Bruins team to a bowl game. It's not out of the question. I've seen what he can do as a head coach. It's extremely possible. But right now, I think it's going to be a major rebuilding year for UCLA. But I think they really turn the ship around next year and certainly get back to a bowl game and in contention in the Pac-12. So as always, please go check us out on Twitter at Gridiron Expert, on Instagram at The Gridiron Expert, and always here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.